So come on up and tell the folks about Moon Express. And for the sake of complete transparency, you should know I am a minor, very minor partner in this crazy wig bubble. We're going to create the first trucking company to the moon.
Great to have you aboard the Moon Express. Thanks. So I'm very happy that Moses began the session with 2001, a clip, which does make my heart race as well, Moses. I was not too young to remember that in the theaters. And at the same time, coming home after school and watching Star Trek and seeing Captain Kirk and the Enterprise flying through, going boldly where no one has gone before. It was a promise to my generation, in my view. And it was not just a promise that was on the screens, it was a promise that was happening in the real world, because that was the era of Apollo as well, when the first human beings were setting forth from our planetary home and putting our first footsteps down in another world. 12 missions to the surface of the moon with humans, 6 missions, 12 people walking on the surface of the moon. That made a promise to many of us who consider ourselves orphans of Apollo, who, when we grew up, went into college, university, wanting to be on that Enterprise. It wasn't there. It hadn't happened. That future that we had so been inspired by had not yet happened. So in the history of commercial space, what we call commercial space, private sector entrepreneurship, its origins are back in those 80s, where we orphans of Apollo felt, where is this future that we so want? And a lot of things happened in those 80s that weren't that visible at that time, but today are leading the commercial activities that are taking the headlines around the world. When you hear about people like Jeff Bezos, after doing Amazon, pouring some of that wealth into creating a new space opportunity, well, Jeff was the president of a chapter of a student group that I had been involved in creating called Students for the Exploration and Development of Space. This was back in the 80s. A lot of us were so inspired. So as the governments did amazing things in planetary exploration, but in many ways lost their way in the promise that we believed we had as kids, the entrepreneurs have taken root and taken over some of those very strong visions. At the company we call Moon Express, it's about getting to the moon. And I believe very much Scott's message that the perspective of space is so important to we human beings. Much more important to our survival than many of us realize. So as companies like Scott's bring the astronaut perspective to us down on Earth, companies like Moon Express will be bringing the human perspective to space and to the moon. Let me show you a little bit about why I think that's important. Think, if you will, about where you would like, or where you think we will be as the species in about 40 years. I picked that number because the young people planning their careers now in their teens or early 20s, in about 40 years they'll be in the prime of their career and in the Singularity University thinking about 10% of their lifespan of 600 or 800 years. And will we be a planetary species bound by our limited resources, being cruel to one another in the fight for what we feel is precious and unattainable anywhere other than Earth? Or will we have, in the sense of 2001, expanded our personalities, our industries, our social presence to the realm of space around the Earth? Or will we have extended ourselves to the planets, where we truly become a multi-world species, not limited to this one primary sole source of potential failure of a very important species in my mind? Maybe we have gone out to the other worlds that are beyond Mars, like is depicted in 2001. Maybe, just maybe, by then, we'll discover that we're not alone, that we're actually members of a galactic civilization that had just waiting for us to show up, and we become part of this encyclopedia galactica of information, and we are truly members of a spacefaring species. Well, These are the types of futures that we contemplated as kids and we're trying to make happen today. But it all starts here on planet Earth. Where do we get the resources? Where do we get the motivations to do these grandiose things? Well, it's that perspective of space that we had a glimpse of in Scott's presentation, that only as an astronaut do you get that sense as the spacecraft moves away where you can put your thumb over that world and completely cover it. Where it gets lost, as my mentor and teacher, Carl Sagan, put it, as a pale blue dot floating in a sunbeam. Everybody you know, all the history that you've learned, everything that has ever happened that has touched the human race, that the human race has done, is on that little pale blue dot, which itself, as you continue to expand outward, becomes lost in billions of other stars we call the Milky Way galaxy, which itself is just a neighborhood in a universe full of neighborhoods of other galaxies, billions and trillions. As we come back to Earth in our journey outward, we get a sense of home, right? Doesn't that feel good? Well, where did the resources come that made the Earth? Well, actually, all of the resources we have came from space. So the birth of the Earth was a very cataclysmic event. And most of the resources that we need as a civilization actually came from space. It was the eons and billions of years of asteroidal bombardment that gave us the enriched Earth that allow us to have a technological civilization. One of the problems there is that those are finite. We don't hopefully get hit by asteroids very frequently anymore, but we did get a reminder just a few months ago, not one but 2 asteroids. One hit, one grazed. That was kind of nature's way of saying, so how's that space program going? But it's a convenient truth that not only was the Earth enriched by asteroid bombardment, but so was our sister world, the Moon. You looked at the Moon lately? See all those craters? Guess what made those craters? Those are the battle scars of the bombardment that the Moon was subjected to, as was the Earth in this early history. And because the Moon is a child of Earth, it has a lot of the common elements of Earth. But the difference geologically is that the Moon had a slightly different history than Earth. It wasn't molten for so long. It cooled much faster. So when these asteroids were hitting the Earth and splashing and all this chaos was going on, a lot of the heavy metals, platinum group metals and gold and silver and nickel, a lot of that sunk in the early molten history of the Earth, whereas the Moon had cooled, the asteroids were hitting, not sinking, shattering, pulverizing, vaporizing, meaning that all of those materials were gathering on the lunar surface. So the Moon, over all these billions of years, was aggregating all these trillions and trillions of dollars of value of material resources. And guess what? It's there. It's up there on the Moon. How do we know? Because we've been sending probes to the Moon for 30, 40 years now. In the last decade, there's been more information brought down by remote probes going around the Moon and looking down, remote sensing, than all the data of the last 30 or 40 years together. We know where the minerals are. We know where those resources are. We can map it. We can see it. We've mapped the geology of the Moon so well that we believe that there could be, for instance, more platinum group metals near the surface of the Moon than all the reserves of Earth. If it's not platinum you like, if it's nickel, there's that too. There's rare earth elements. They're called rare earth elements because they don't exist in plenty on the Earth, but those rare earth elements, many of them, are actually common lunar elements. Pick your spice. Helium-3 is a potential source of clean energy for the world. Fusion energy, a promising technology, not yet available. When it is, there's something like 1 kilogram of helium-3 to fuel it on all the reserves of Earth. There are over 1 trillion tons of helium-3 on the Moon. So another interesting aspect of the Moon that was only recently discovered, when I was looking at the Moon through the Apollo eyes, I thought it was a dead, dry rock. Didn't you? All those black and white images. I'm talking to the over 40s, I guess, mostly. Didn't you think it was kind of a dead, dry world? Magnificent desolation is what my friend Buzz Aldrin called it. Well, we discovered that there's water on the moon. In the last 10 years, evidence piled up and then proof through probes that splashed on the moon, hit the moon and splashed up material. We measured that material. I'm talking not oceans and lakes, but frozen water. Water that is congealed in ices at each pole of the moon, but is ubiquitously spread around the moon as well. Accessible water that takes the economics of space and completely turns it around. Water is the oil of the solar system. Why? Because the components of water, hydrogen and oxygen, become rocket fuel. The problem with space travel today is that you have to take all the fuel with you. Imagine if you had to do that every time you got in your car, that there weren't gas stations. If we can create a gas station on the moon, it'll be the fuel depot that will not only make the moon an economical partner of the Earth, but it'll completely change the economics of the entire solar system. So welcome to the moon rush. It is today that we are actually, when I look around to what's actually happening, that Star Trek world that I dreamed about when I was a kid, you know, we're in it. We're living it. It's not immediately apparent when we walk out these doors and you look around that we're in Star Trek, but we are. I have a communicator in my back pocket. I can transport matter. I can, just 3 days ago before I came here down at Singularity University, I was talking to a biotechnology expert in a serious conversation about teleporting life to the moon. This is about sending DNA, experimenting on creating life at a distance, and so we're talking about the things in the realm of Star Trek we're living in. So we really have the Star Trek universe, and it's being created through the entrepreneurship. So we're looking at the moon as entrepreneurs now. The moon has been looked at by scientists very well for decades, looking for science. It's a wonderful scientific Rosetta Stone. It has the history of the solar system etched across the surface. The moon has enormous scientific value, but it also has economic value. We're looking at it as entrepreneurs for the first time. At NASA Ames, where Moon Express exists, just across the field from Singularity University, we're building small robotic explorers that will go to the moon and do the land proof that the resources are there. We're going to learn how to operate on the moon for magnitudes less money than it would cost a government to do. My co-founder, Naveen Jain, you already met. Is Naveen in the audience here anywhere? There he is. My co-founder, Naveen Jain. Thank you, Naveen. Every good commercial space company needs a billionaire. and Naveen is the man who stepped up and said, Bob, let's do this. And together with our other co-founder, Barney Pell, we created Moon Express, gathered together the best and brightest spacecraft engineers in the world. We have a team of about 30 engineers working at NASA Ames. If you walk into the office, we have what we call a P to O ratio, a Padawan to Obi-Wan ratio of 3 to 1. So for every gray-haired, experienced person, you have about a 3 really annoying 20-something saying, but why can't we do it another way? Why can't we do it that way? And what's so annoying is often they're right. So we're innovating, we're creating new technologies, we're embracing technologies that didn't even exist when we started the companies 2 years ago. It's completely revolutionizing how we're engineering our spacecraft. Where what used to take kilograms of technology is dematerializing into software. Smaller spacecraft means smaller launch vehicles, means more economical ways of getting to the moon, means lower cost of access, means opening up entire new markets and allowing us to go to the moon, extend our senses, immersive technologies, learn what's there. There are vistas on the moon. I'm telling you, everyone, it's not a gray, dead rock with boring, regolith plains. There are mountains on the moon that are higher than Everest. There are canyons and craters that are 3 times the depth of the Grand Canyon. There are vistas there that we just haven't experienced yet as humans, and we will with our robotic explorers. We have these facilities at NASA Ames that we have access to as a company through a very special relationship. It's called a Space Act Agreement. In the United States, NASA has the ability to provide contracts to the private sector that allows the private sector to pay NASA. We pay NASA to help us understand the technology, the wonderful technology that they've developed, but pick and choose the technologies that we need to innovate in a very cost-effective way. We have access to the best and the brightest at NASA. We use our own innovation and our own young talent and we engineer low-cost robotic systems that are going to completely change the economics of getting to the moon. It'll open up public awareness and access, and we believe that the resources on the moon will completely change the economics of Earth. Where in the future of abundance that we do believe in at Singular University will become possible through space resources. Yes, the asteroids have enormous resources, but guess what? They're on the moon. We know where they are. We've measured them. We can go get them. And even better, they're pre-processed, right? They're all crunched up. They're all pulverized. So we believe that there's a very great argument that we will be living in a world that is enriched with space resources very quickly. NASA is going to be sending its next orbiter to the moon called LADEE later this year. You'll see it launch. It's a spacecraft that's our sister spacecraft. We have a spacecraft that if you take the spacecraft you're seeing on the screen, add some landers to it, make it a little smaller, we're embracing the technology and have a nice quick on-ramp to our exploration through the advantage of our relationship with NASA, but we are commercializing it in a way that we don't need to embrace the adversity to risk that government-controlled organizations have. We can do it in a way that is very commercially friendly. So as LADEE goes to the moon later this year, we will be learning a lot about that mission. And then it'll be orbiting the moon for about 3 months. And then in 2015, Moon Express is going to start Moon 2.0. When we land on the moon for the private sector for the first time, we involve students, we involve the general public. We will give you selfies from the moon. You can say, "Will you marry me?" on the moon, and we'll make that happen too. So in 2015, I think this will begin the new era of space commercialization, a way for us to participate in space. The economics of Earth will be changed around. Our visions of space travel will start to be realized, and we as human beings will be going to the moon thanks to the commercial enterprises partnered with the governments. Thank you very much.